Maria, welcome back to the Mea Culpa podcast. So great to see you. So much going on. You know, it's like every time I speak to a guest, it's like I say the same thing. There's so much going on. The hour goes by too quick. Gonna jump right into it. So
that's wonderful. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. So with the Iran-Israel war escalating and Trump positioning himself as a wartime president without a coherent strategy or a diplomatic framework, how would we interpret this erratic behavior, the recklessness, the political calculation, or do we call it both? And what do you think of the real world consequences for America's credibility abroad?
So let's start with the real world consequences, because that's what I think is the most dire. Michael, when Trump was headed to the G7 summit, I did a CNN segment and they asked us about this. And essentially what I said was he goes into that summit incredibly weak, because let's remember the promise and the premise of Donald Trump during the campaign. He said under no uncertain terms that he would resolve the Ukraine-Russia war on day one, that he would resolve the Israel-Gaza war on day one. Obviously, he has done neither. He has been incapable of bringing home all of the hostages, and the world is more on fire today than when Donald Trump took office, which is counter to the biggest argument that he made on foreign policy, which is that he would keep America outside of the conflicts, which is that if he was president, then none of this would have happened. Well, he's president now, and we are possibly on the verge of a nuclear event on a global scale. So those are the massively dire consequences. And by the way, the reason why we are on that verge is because Donald Trump stupidly withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal back in 2018. And the whole focus of that deal, as you know well, is to keep Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Why is Israel now attacking Iran? So that they don't get a nuclear weapon. We could have done that. We were on the path to doing that in a peaceful manner. So,
but doesn't that, but Maria, I'm so sorry, but doesn't that assume that Iran was actually, that the Ayatollah was going to live up to the nuclear agreement, right? I mean, look, we know that that was bullshit, that they were secretly weaponizing nuclear fusion, as the same with North Korea and so on. Yeah, they signed these agreements, but they don't care, because Iran, for as long as I have been alive, has wanted to become a nuclear power. In fact, every president in my entire lifetime, every single president in my lifetime has turned around and said the same thing. We must never allow Iran to have nuclear capability. So isn't Trump just sort of yet another president in line with the attempt to denuclearize Iran?
Yes, that is true. And I agree with you that has always been the goal. And I think ultimately what we're going to have to figure out, whoever is president, is that unless they go in and completely destroy, Iran's nuclear capabilities, which, by the way, could possibly happen, right? But we don't know what other secret capabilities they might have. I think ultimately Iran is at some point going to get a nuclear weapon. But what I'm talking, but my point from earlier is that the original Iran nuclear deal was going to keep them from getting to the point where they are now. It would have taken them a lot longer to get there, like a decade or more. So at the very least, we would have been able to push this off, right, for a long time. Because to your point, it's not that we would necessarily take their word for it, because they're completely untrustworthy. We know that. But there were checks and balances in place where inspectors would go in. There would be, a lot of ways in order to check what they were doing. None of that is allowed anymore. None of that has happened since we withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. So they were able to expedite their development of a nuclear weapon. And it was on the fast track. And that's why we are where we are now. So Trump now is saber rattling, which, and Trump better than anyone, is something that I am sure he loves to do, right? He loves to portray an image of strength and of being a badass on the global scale. But what does that do in terms of our positioning for being, the global keepers of peace, and supposedly being able to influence our allies like Israel in terms of what they're doing? Because clearly Netanyahu kind of told Trump, F you, and Netanyahu went in and, dropped all of these bombs and missiles into Iran, which again is the reason why we are in the situation that we're in.
Right. I mean, I'm not opposed to what Netanyahu has done, to be very honest with you. I think it was the right move, not just for Israel, but for the whole world. I think Iran is the Ayatollah and that regime, they're just really super dangerous people. And
no question about that.
While they talk about, Iran becoming nuclear, and then obviously calling for the destruction of Israel, they've also called for the death of America. They've also now gone after Saudi Arabia. I mean, they've gone after the entire region because they are just a extremist theocracy. But this is a very interesting issue because the GOP is splintering over how deeply America should engage in this global conflict, especially right in this Middle East. Does this divide reflect a philosophical shift, or do you think it's a sign of a party that is no longer grounded in policy, but rather in personality?
I think it's a little bit of both, Michael. And again, this goes to what I started with. The reason why there is a serious rift in right-wing MAGA world is because both in 2016 and in 2020, Donald Trump ran as an isolationist. He ran criticizing every one of his opponents who, in his mind, were the reason why we were in all of these unresolvable conflicts abroad, why we were spending billions of dollars in other countries as opposed to spending that money at home. And that was a tremendously powerful message for his MAGA base, both in 2016 as well as 2020. You know this better than most because he did this even at the beginning of 2010 during the, or even before that, during the election of in 2008, because I remember him criticizing every Democrat who voted for the Iraq War when, of course, this was happening. He didn't have a vote, but we all know he supported the Iraq War and he lied about it, right? That's who he is. But the philosophy for Donald Trump in 2016 and in 2020 was an isolationist philosophy, which does go counter to the roots of the the traditional conservative Republican Party, right? And so I think all of that now is starting to be reflected in all of the tension that is now existing within the current GOP, which includes an isolationist MAGA base that voted for Trump because of what he promised, both in 2016 and in 2020, which was to not just get us out of the current conflicts, but to not get us into any additional serious conflicts.
Sure. It's now everywhere. So obviously, right. Russia, Ukraine is still active. Israel, Hamas is still active. We have an issue between Pakistan and India.
In India, that's right.
Which is still going on. We still have not gotten the hostages back. On top of that, now you have Israel with Iran. I mean, there's a lot of conflict that's going on. But that brings me to, I really did, despite I can't stand either of them. I watched Ted Cruz on Tucker Carlson.
I knew you were going to go there.
Sure. All right. I mean, you're talking about two individuals who used to speak in unison. And I watched as Tucker Carlson shredded Ted Cruz to pieces with his, I think he's Harvard educated or whatever it might be. I know Ted Cruz is Ivy League educated, made him look like an idiot, like a complete and total fucking idiot who knew nothing about Iran other than taking a very strong stance. Not that I disagree with the stance, but right. Tucker Carlson had a point. And I hate to say that because I think Tucker Carlson is just a fucking asshole, right? But I take that as just one of many examples. And with that, I wanted to ask you, are we witnessing the collapse of a unifying foreign policy doctrine in the Republican Party? Because these were two guys that literally spoke identical phrases. And what does it mean for global stability when one of our two major parties, our only two parties, can no longer speak with a single voice?
I think it's really concerning, Michael. And, one of the things that we can look at is, again, this sort of evolution and then devolution of where the Republican Party writ large is on this. And what this tells me is that what Donald Trump was able to do in 2016, 2020, 2024, is paper over the massive tensions that completely existed but weren't as obvious because we were not really in a situation where they could come to the fore the way that they are now. So what I mean by that is that Donald Trump very easily took advantage of what he knew was going to be a stance that was going to be very popular with the MAGA base by acting as an isolationist, by talking about how America should focus at home, America should not be involved in any foreign wars. That's not our fight. We shouldn't care about that, which we all know goes counter to, again, Republican conservative policy, traditional, as well as what we know should be the role, at least in my opinion, of the United States in the world, which is that of a key ally in the democratic sort of, Western ideology, and protecting that as much as you can. Now, what has happened since then is that you now have the traditional Republican conservative ideologists like Ted Cruz going up against what has become a very powerful isolationist MAGA-based ideology in the likes of Tucker Carlson and in the likes of Trump's majority MAGA base. And they don't like this.
Sure. So let's take them as an example. The Tucker Carlsons, the MAGA base, the isolationists, and so on.
Steve Bannon.
The Steve Bannons. They have to understand, they must understand that a nuclearized Iran is not, forget about whether it's a danger to Israel or not. It's mutually assured destruction. Don't forget, Israel's capabilities far exceed that of Iran. So if Iran became nuclear, so what? Doesn't make a difference. It would be mutually assured destruction. But do they not understand that we share the same air on this planet? That what takes place in the Middle East, sure, you're not going to feel it for 36 hours, but 36 hours, that air circulates through the globe and right here into the good old US of A, that it also will poison the food supply. People will become sick. We have only one Earth for all of us to live on. Nuclear is a freaking disaster. It's why when the Fukushima nuclear reactor, right, started to leak, the entire world's nuclear programs went running over there in order to ensure that it didn't end up leaking into the waterways and to poisoning right? The earth. I mean, I don't understand why they think that this far extremist Islamic ideology, and it's not Islam, it is not,
No, right.
the Quran. It is
Yes.
their,
I'm glad you made that distinction.
warped, it's their warped extremist use of the Quran in order to act in a manner which is inconsistent with the 21st century, right? And, it's a theocracy that puts you in a better place if you are dead than if you are alive. It is relatively impossible to beat a theocracy that says, you know what, this is the holding place for your soul right here, right today, current on earth. It's just a holding place. You die as a martyr, you're going to a much better place with your 72 virgins, as if that's some sort of, as if who the fuck wants that? I have no idea. But with 72 virgins, and you're living in paradise and so on. So, this has been brainwashed to them. This is the part that I am so concerned. And I don't even want to talk about Republicans being divided. I'm talking about Democrats as well, who are divided on this same issue. It's, to me, should be one voice, and not just America. I'm talking about the whole world. Again, because what takes place between Israel and Iran at this very juncture affects everybody in the world.
No doubt, Michael. And I completely agree with you. This isn't right now a Republican versus Democratic issue, and it shouldn't be, right? Because this is existential for all of us as a global community. To your point, Iran having a nuclear capability is something that puts the whole world in danger. Now, where I think Democrats are, and I think that they are sober in this, is that right now they have been completely locked out of any kind of briefings, information, what's going on, what is the reality, what's happening on the ground, what have Trump's conversations been with Israel and Netanyahu, what have his conversations been with Russia, right? What are they prepared to do or not do, since they're, allies with Iran, if you will. So what Democrats have been saying, and I think this is a smart positioning, is that they're not saying, no, Donald Trump, we cannot go in and bomb Iran, we can't get involved. That's not what they're saying. What they're saying is that if there really is the possibility for the United States to go in and help Israel with their, what do they call that bomb? The
Moab. It's the Moab.
Yes, exactly.
It's the bunker buster.
The
Moab.
bunker buster.
Right.
Exactly.
But it's what's referred to. Moab is sort of the acronym for mother of all bombs.
Right.
It's the bunker buster. They come two at a time. So one smashes a hole into the ground deep, like 50 plus feet. And the second one, which is laser targeted to the same spot, just opens it up to hundreds of feet underneath.
Then destroys anything that's in there, right? So if we were to go in and do that, that is an aggressive war event, right? So according to the Constitution, Congress should be the one giving the president the authority to do that. And that way we are all on the same page. We are speaking with one voice. That's what Democrats are asking for. They are asking for this administration to go up to Congress to brief them, as they should, both Republicans and Democrats, what the situation is, what the dire nature of it is, what is the possibility of the United States going in and partnering with Israel to do this, what is the classified information that we have, what do our intelligence services say, what is the probability of success, what is the danger? How can it go, awry?
Yeah, a full strategy, a full wartime strategy
together in a bipartisan way, and then they can come out of that to say, this is where the United States stands, Israel and Iran, right? We are going to help Israel keep you from getting a bomb. And maybe that will even push Iran to say, okay, I'm going to give up my nuclear capability, right? I doubt it. But again, going in there with a unified voice, to me, is a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't Trump want that?
But he does want it. That's the whole thing. He does. It's not really fair. And I am not bending the knee, but I want to be fair. It's important to my listeners. It's important to America. All right. The problem is there's such a fucking divide. There's such a divide between Republicans and Democrats that they cannot even sit at a table to discuss something as important as a nuclearized Iran, which places not just America, but the entire world in jeopardy. The fact that we are so divided, where Trump and his administration, they don't feel that they're going to get any cooperation even on this issue, right? So they shut out the Democrats. The Democrats, right, have their own reasoning for why they want to get information, sit down at the table so that they could blast the president on something, right? And this is the back and forth. And as an American, as somebody who has about 200 family members that live in Israel, as somebody who is a taxpayer in this country, I can't stand our politicians. It is not their job to play political party politics when you're talking about something as existential. They forget that they work for us, right? They are all looking for their 15 minutes or their 5-minute clips they could send to all of their constituents to stuff their fucking coffers, right, for their next political campaign. And I say, I don't give a shit about them. Their job is to make sure that not just America is safe, but the whole world is safe, all right, including many Americans who are living right now in Israel.
Yeah.
Right. There are thousands and thousands of Americans who are, they have dual citizenship.
They have to be terrified right now, Michael.
Yeah.
And,
and
I think understandably so. But to your point, I actually think Donald Trump has a golden opportunity here. Because if he were to be seen as going to the Hill and inviting the Democrats and inviting the Republicans to a bipartisan classified briefing and strategy session, then it's on the Democrats to accept it and say, yes, we will work with you, Mr. President. This is an existential threat for us and for our global community. Let's do this. It puts them, the Democrats, then in a position to have to accept that, or if not, then they are seen as the ones who are playing politics with this. So
they're playing politics with our lives, with the existence
Trump
of the
done
planet.
That yet, Michael. Trump has not done that. He has not offered this briefing that Democrats are asking for, and I think he should, because, like I said, I think this is a golden opportunity for him.
So do I.
I hope that he takes it. I hope that he kind of tries to take off all of the political back and forth, and look at this as an opportunity for him to really show, if he has any, anything in him, to talk about how he wants to do this for the good of the country and the good of the global community. I think he could do this. As you and I know, what then screws things up, even if he has any kind of good intention, is when people start whispering in his ear, no, you shouldn't do this because of this. No, you shouldn't do this because of that.
So he has terrible enablers that are around him. And we all know the names of a handful of them, but I suspect that there's even more. But how I know that what we're saying right now is accurate about the divisiveness and the animus that a sitting member who's Republican has towards a sitting member of the Democratic Party, and vice versa, is just look, for example, at the detainment of Senator Alex Padilla. It's not just alarming, it's unprecedented.
It's unprecedented. It's terrifying.
Terrifying.
It's terrifying.
Do you see this as a political warning shot? And if so, how do we protect democratic norms from being weaponized in this way?
That's such a good question, Michael, because I do think that what happened to Senator Padilla and what has happened to the mayors and what happened to the judge and what happened to, I think recently, the New York Attorney General, this is, like you said, not just unprecedented, but it's alarming and it should be terrifying. Because if the administration and law enforcement agencies under Donald Trump's control can do that to those elected officials, imagine what they can do to normal everyday citizens. And frankly,
hello,
doing right.
Hello,
Yes.
I'm sitting watching television with my lawyer when we went to go sign when we were asked to sign a counterfeit federal location monitor agreement when three of the biggest human beings I've ever seen in my life, Mr. Cohen, stand up and face the wall. Right? I understand what Alex Padilla...
You've lived this.
I sure have. I didn't live it the way Alex Padilla did, where they put him on the floor, they brought him downstairs, and then they let him out. They put me in a fucking freezer, in a freezer cell for 3 hours, shit me up for another 16 days, making it 51 days of solitary confinement. The first 2.5 days, no food at all. I know what it's like to be abused by the system, which sort of raises the follow-up question I wanted to ask you. What do we do when they start treating, individuals like this? These are public servants, to your point. I was just a critic, right? So, imagine they can do this to public servants. Yeah, exactly. Imagine what they can do to you.
That's exactly right. I think what we need to do, Michael, is talk about this nonstop, mobilize around it nonstop. We saw what that can do as a flash in the pan on Saturday. We saw millions of people going out and protesting for, No King's Day, while at the same time Donald Trump had his lame military parade. But what I will say is that's not enough. We have to continue to talk about this every day. We have to continue to mobilize everyday Americans to get them to raise their voice and to act on this, because the only way that we fix this, Michael, is by getting Republicans who have enabled this kind of behavior from Donald Trump out of office in 2026, and then ultimately get, whether it's Donald Trump and he's going to try to run again, or J.D. Vance, if he's the candidate, or whoever else is a candidate, make sure that we defeat them in 2028. And I think that is a tremendous challenge for us, because there's a long time between now and next year's congressional elections, midterm elections, and definitely a long time between now and 2028. But I do think that what is right now playing in our favor is that Americans, everyday Americans, are starting to realize that what Democrats were saying would happen in a second Donald Trump term was not exaggeration. It was not just a talking point. It is actually coming to fruition in the scariest, most terrifying ways imaginable. And that is something that we're going to have to keep up every single day and highlight every single thing that happens and put it in that rubric about how Donald Trump and his administration and the federal agencies that are under his control, he is weaponizing them and going after American citizens. And if they can do that to a Michael Cohen, to a Senator Padilla, to these mayors, to a judge, to the New York Attorney General, imagine what they can do to you. And that is something, I think that is a message that is resonating. We are seeing Donald Trump's polls collapsing around us on every issue, the economy, immigration, his overall approval rating. So it's going to take a lot of energy on our part and a lot of making sure that we communicate the message in the places where we were absent in 2024, making sure that we talk to the communities and the voters that we missed in 2024, and let them know how important this is for the lives and livelihoods of their families and their communities.
So, it's funny that you brought up the distinction between the parade, the military parade, and of course the No Kings protests. I did a massive Substack on it, and I issue a warning to all of my subscribers on my Substack. And I want people to hear me, right? We get great numbers here on Mea Culpa too. So I want everybody to hear me loud and clear. First of all, I wasn't happy. I was not happy that the parade was so lackluster. Now, I don't care that it was in conjunction with his birthday. I truly don't. It's the 250th anniversary of our army. And out of respect to them and the sacrifices over 250 years, I would have loved to have seen something big and grand. And so it's not what turned out. The mistake that Democrats are making is where they keep saying, holy shit, look at that lackluster, boring birthday bash parade, military parade versus and I've heard various different numbers, anywhere from like 7 million to 12 million people attending these over 1,800 organized No Kings protests. And I want to be clear, as I state in my Substack, the 11 or 12 million, even taking the high number, that doesn't win an election.
Yeah.
It's the same stupid narrative that Democrats were making when they would say, look at the rallies. Look at Kamala Harris rallies versus the Donald Trump rallies, where they would show a video of people walking out of, his rallies, like shaking their head. What the fuck, right? Didn't we hear that same nonsense over now for 5 years? Let me also say, to be completely frank and accurate, Trump bulldozed every one of those misstatements by the Democrats, bulldozed right through it. Not only did he win in 2024, he won the plurality, he won the majority of votes, and he won all 7 swing states. So if anybody thinks that the 11 or 12 million folks that went to these the No Kings protest, these are the same 12 million people that voted for Kamala Harris. Your point is the important point. We need to go back into the communities that we lost. We need to go back to these individuals, take them by the hand, and show them that the policies that are currently coming out of this administration harm them and their families, that we don't take them for granted, which we have been doing year after year. So you show up 30, 60 days before an election. Hey, we're your party. Come give us a hug. And they're saying, go fuck yourself. We don't believe any of you. That's the problem. We have let these marginalized, these disenfranchised groups of individuals, not in its totality, but Trump and his group very smartly, very, very intelligently went and they started picking off small little pieces, 2% here, 3% here, 5% in the Black community, the Latino community. Holy shit. After he turned around and made comments like all Mexicans are drug dealers, murderers, rapists, everybody, right?
Puerto Rico is trash.
Right. I mean, even the Muslim community, right? Even the Muslim community forgot the 2017 policy, the Muslim ban. They called it an immigration ban. It was a Muslim ban. They forgot that and they voted in record numbers for Trump. We need, if we are going to win back the House, if we are going to win back the Senate, we need to go back to these communities, not sit there and pat ourselves on the ass because 12 million people that voted for Kamala Harris the first time showed up to a protest. That's not the people. We need those independents. We need those 77 million Americans that turned around and said, I can't vote for Donald Trump. I find him repulsive. But I'm not going to vote for a black woman. I can't vote for the Democrat either. And so apathy set in and they stayed home. 77 million, one third of all those that voted stayed home. And if we don't start targeting these folks with messages that are unique, that are simplistic, that are relevant to their lives, Donald Trump won this election with his 3-word slogan, which is all he always does. 3-word slogan. If it doesn't fit on a trucker hat, he's not interested in it. He won the election defeating Kamala Harris's white paper policies and her, we need to return the soul of America back to America. Yeah, is that great? The hell does that even mean? Trump beat the shit out of us off of 3 words: gasoline and groceries. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. We need to start doing the same and stop patting ourselves on the ass because because No Kings put together a big protest around the country.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. I completely agree with everything that you said, Michael, but you said something that was key: gasoline and groceries.
Yep.
You are right. That's what he won on. And guess what's happening now? He has done shit on trying to bring down the cost of gasoline and groceries. And that's where I think Democrats have a tremendous opportunity to really dig into not just how unfit Trump is to govern and to deliver on his empty promises, because he has not done any of it. He has simply focused on enriching himself and his family. But we need to point out how it's the Democratic policies that actually help all of these communities, working class voters, middle class families, Black voters, Latino voters, young voters, to live a better life in this country and not just get ahead. They can get ahead and they can succeed and they can thrive, not just survive. And on your issue of, the slogan, he promised so much on the campaign, and polls show that the non-MAGA voters, the ones that you talked about, right, who were convinced that, even though they might not love him, they trusted him more on the economy because they look at his first term through rose-colored glasses for whatever reason, and just remember the first half of his term and not the fact that he fucked up the COVID pandemic, and that's why the economy went into the toilet, right? They remember the first part of it, and they trusted him more to give them more of that. Donald Trump is not giving them more of that. He has done nothing. And in fact, the things that he has done, per economists on the left and the right, they all say that his policies will actually raise the costs of inflation, raise the cost of groceries, raise the cost of gas. So we need to go in there, and to your point about the 3-word slogans, Trump betrayed you. He betrayed you, right? He stabbed you in the back. He does not have your best interests at heart. He's done nothing to keep his promises to bring down the cost of groceries, gas, and rent. He betrayed you. And I think if
that's a good one. That's a good 3. I keep yelling and saying tariffs are taxes.
There you go. Exactly. And all of that goes under
consumers, right? Consumers pay tariffs, right? And that way, every time you go to the store, even though he was successful in getting these big box, outlets not to put down as the additional tariff that you're going to be paying. But when you start feeling, because right now we're in a little bit of a lull, but when those tariffs start really hitting and your supply chain gets smashed, and all of a sudden something that you paid $1 for is now $10 and you can't afford it, right? Then all of a sudden that slogan, right? Trump betrayed you. Tariffs are taxes. Consumers pay tariffs. How about something like, we deserve better?
America
simplicity.
Yep.
It's all about simplicity. But what it's more about than anything, and this was Trump's greatest, this is This is Donald Trump in a nutshell. I'm going to give it to you, knowing him as well as I do. One thing, whether you like him or you hate him, you love him and you hate him for the exact same reason. He is authentic. He is 100% authentic. He is himself. He doesn't give a shit if, it's proper to slap somebody in the ass, right? He doesn't care. He's going to do it because that's him. He's going to turn around and put military as props behind him, right? When he went and he spoke to Army, when he went and he literally put up 2 flagpoles in the back behind the White House. He had as props a bunch of the construction workers. People either love him or they hate him because he's authentic. He will do what he wants to do. He will say what he wants to say without any apology and just simply without any thought to what it is that he's saying. So we need to be authentic. You can't get up, with all due respect to Hakeem Jeffries, and I happen to like the guy, right? But when he gets up and he starts speaking on the floor, it's not a sermon. It's not a sermon. We don't want to be preached to. We want you to give us your authentic self. Not what your speechwriter if you would get a hold of his speeches, it'll say slam hand against table, right? It looks that way. It's orchestrated. It's a bad movie. With Trump, again, love him or hate him, he's authentic. He could be authentically mean. He could be authentically charming.
Authentically nasty. And,
right?
People see that as like, that's human. And he's coming to us as he is with no filters.
Right.
And people think that is a huge plus right now. And it is. And who especially for, Michael? Young people. Young people can smell bullshit 5 miles away. That's why all the social media stuff, right, works for them, because there's no filter there. People are showing themselves, their true selves. Obviously there will be people who are going to pretend to be otherwise, but you can tell, right, who's being authentic. And love him or hate him, to your point, Donald Trump is always himself, right? As hateful and deceitful and nasty and bigoted and racist and xenophobic as that is, clearly that has hit a note in this country. And that is what we're up against. And
that's for sure.
We need to fight that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Meanwhile, you brought up things about Trump, for example, enriching himself. I often say, and I've said it on television, I say it to journalists, I say it on my YouTube channel, I talk about it on my Substack. Imagine for just 1 second, if this was the Biden family who was doing it, if this was Hunter Biden who was actually opening up, that bought Truth Social. They're using Truth Social as a platform where the information that the president is giving to the American people is first released on his social media platform. Then, big announcement. There's a big announcement coming out, right? And everybody, if I tell you, Maria, the number of people that called me, journalists galore, hey, by any chance, do you know what this big announcement on Monday is? We thought maybe it had something to do with Iran. Maybe it has something to do with the hostages. Maybe it has something to do with Hamas. Maybe it has something to do with India and Pakistan. No. This is the launch of Trump Mobile. It's a new now self-contained communication network, which many, of course, on the Democratic side are calling a communication network for disinformation. Mm-hmm. So the question, right, is imagine if this was Hunter Biden that was launching a new telecom program.
Oh, my goodness.
Right?
The outrage.
Right? And especially the full outrage.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But taking the Truth Social and the launch of this Trump Mobile, it's obviously all about self-enrichment. How serious a threat do you think this is to civic literacy, especially as we head into this midterm election cycle?
I think it's a huge threat, Michael, something unprecedented that we all need to not just keep an eye out for, but be incredibly concerned about, because we've already seen the poisonous, pernicious, nefarious role that disinformation and, frankly, outright lies, conspiracy theories have played in the past 3 presidential election cycles, and then obviously midterms as well. People believe what they see, especially somebody like Donald Trump put on their socials. They believe it 1,000%. And so that is what has allowed him to rise to power, because he has this communications network that allows him and those that are with him to communicate all of these lies, all of this disinformation, all of the conspiracy theories, even knowing themselves that it's not true. And it allows them to feed this to their base. Their base believes it, and it starts spreading, throughout. One of the things that I think Democrats completely sort of, fell flat on is competing in that information, in the information warfare space, because we weren't present in the places where not just Donald Trump's information was being shared, but where it was being catapulted forward, if you will. So maybe people didn't hear it directly from Truth Social, but then that starts to spread. And then it's 3 times removed, 6 times removed. And then it lands in, media spaces that are looked as general media, as mainstream media. And then people start to believe it, right? It becomes a sort of poisonous mix that gets into everyone's bloodstream. And that is incredibly difficult to fight, but we have to fight it nonetheless. And the way that we do that is by being present in all of these information networks, in all of the social media spaces, Discord, Twitch, YouTube, right? All of these places where this became sort of that poisonous cauldron that started boiling. And it is, I think right now, a strength of Donald Trump. And if
most certainly,
if he gets to do Trump Mobile, that is even yet another place where that becomes an instrument, that becomes a weapon that he can use to continue the misinformation and the disinformation.
I mean, you're talking about his Truth Social platform, where there's so much disinformation, misinformation, malinformation being put out there. I hate to say it, but it's being put out there by our commander in chief. But that platform faces no legal, no ethical, and no editorial scrutiny at all. So I actually have a question for you, because you've spent your entire career advocating for Latino political empowerment. When I was telling you about, for example, just the 3, and it's not just only Latinos that are subject to ICE, and but happens to be the 3 that were. What message does it send to young Latinos when you see these 3 elected officials from their communities publicly restrained by ICE? How does that trauma sort of reverberate? Because if I was Latino and I saw that, and somebody says, hey, join us over at this facility or join us on this march, I'd say, you know what? I'll tell you what, I'll watch it on television. I don't want my hands behind my back. I don't want to be handcuffed. And I can tell you, from someone who's handcuffed many times, unfortunately, like half a dozen plus, it hurts.
Yeah, I'm sure that is not a situation that anyone wants to find themselves in. And you're right. I think it is a tactic of fear. It's one of the reasons why they do it, I think. But I think on our end, we can take that and turn it into, don't let this fear keep you from understanding what your rights and what your voice can do to ensure that your community and that your aunt and you yourself cannot be subjected to this anymore, right? This is not normal. And this is where I think so many of us, because everything is coming at us, at a fever pitch, we're exhausted. And so a lot of this is taken as normal in the era of Trump. And we have to, Michael, resist that temptation to normalize this, to say, oh yeah, well, that's just Trump being Trump. Well, no, Trump being Trump is Trump being a criminal and shredding our Constitution and destroying our civil rights and taking away our voices. And we cannot allow it.
So then let me ask you this, because the hour goes by very quickly here. So I have a final question for you here, right? Maria, with what you just said, how would you speak to young people, Latino or not, especially though those that are in marginalized communities who are witnessing these multiple abuses of power, who are losing faith in our democracy, and who are really concerned that they will not be protected?
Yeah.
What do you say to these folks?
Yeah, the first thing I would do, and I have, because I do speak to these people often, I acknowledge that the Democratic Party didn't do as well as we should have in being in the spaces where these communities are, in talking to all of the important pieces and places where these communities live their lives. And then I say, but you need to take a look at it. And I know, many of you speak to, and maybe you yourself voted for Donald Trump in 2024, or at least the Democratic candidate and party did not give you a reason to come out and vote for them, and you stayed home. Let me be 1,000% clear with you. What's happening now is not normal. Donald Trump is weaponizing the federal government and law enforcement agencies to go after people that look like you and that look like me and that sound like us. But that is not something that we need to accept. That is not something that we should be normalizing. And let me be very clear. When Trump said to you that he was going to be deporting violent, dangerous, criminal, undocumented immigrants, Donald Trump calls them illegals, he wasn't just talking about criminal, violent, undocumented immigrants. He was talking about your abuela, your sister, your aunt, because we have seen it in action. Mm-hmm. He has detained and deported many undocumented immigrants who had zero criminal record and whose only offense was to be here without documents. And that is another, right? He betrayed you moment. And that's what I say. Trump betrayed you. You trusted him to protect you and to go after the criminal undocumented immigrants that were doing harm to our communities. Well, he's not doing that. He is also going after your family, your breadwinners, everyone who works hard to try to make a life for themselves, a future for themselves, which is the reason we all came to this country at one point or another. And Trump betrayed you. He betrayed your trust. He betrayed your belief in him. It's Democrats that are the ones who will give you the tools to live a better life and to ensure that you have the rights under the U.S. Constitution and that you have a right and a voice and you can have that voice heard. Come out and march with us. Come out and mobilize your community. Get registered to vote. Walk with me hand in hand and let's go door to door and let's have, Substack conversations, Instagram conversations, Twitch conversations, Discord conversations. Let's convince your friends and your family that Donald Trump is a threat to your life and your livelihood in this country. He has no interest in you. He has no interest in making the life here that you have worked so hard for better for you. He is only interested in enriching himself and his family at your cost, at your behest, on your shoulders. He has no interest in making sure that your rights are fought for, that your rights are reserved, and everything that he is doing is focused on enriching himself and his family.
Well, Maria Cardona, thank you for joining me. You make us all smarter, passionate for certain. Appreciate you very much for joining me again on Mea Culpa, and we'll be doing our Substacks together real soon.
I love that. Thank you so much, Michael. Muchas gracias for having me as your guest. I really appreciate it.
De nada. Gracias.
Bye.